The town I grew up in had one stoplight and a Dollar General that everyone treated like a shopping mall. My mother used to say it was cozy. I called it invisible, which is exactly how I felt growing up in it. I was the quiet one, the older one, the one who did her homework at the kitchen table while my younger brother Cade got his done eventually and somehow still got praised for it. I don't say that with bitterness anymore. I say it because it's just true, the way weather is true. You don't argue with it, you just learn to carry an umbrella. By the time I was 22, I had left that town so far behind I could barely remember the smell of it. Diesel and cut grass and something faintly like regret. I took a full scholarship to a university 3 states away, graduated early, walked straight into a corporate finance job that paid me more in my first year than my father made in 3. I did not tell them that. I did not tell them most things by then. It wasn't that I was hiding. It was that I had learned, slowly over years of being the background character in my own family's story, that my news was never really met with a celebration. It was met with a kind of suspicious curiosity, like they were trying to figure out what it meant for them. So I shared less, and then less, and eventually almost nothing. I called every Sunday. I kept it easy. How's the dog? How's your knee? Did you watch the game? The real parts of my life I kept somewhere they couldn't reach. I was good at my job, better than good. By 28, I had started putting serious money into index funds, some private equity opportunities a colleague had walked me through, and a few decisions that, looking back, were the right call at exactly the right time. I am not a genius. I want to be clear about that. I was just careful and consistent, and I did not spend money trying to impress people who didn't care about me anyway. By the time I was 31, my net worth had crossed $9 million. I did not tell my family. I had a small apartment that I kept deliberately unremarkable, a used car. I wore the same winter coat for 4 years because it was a good coat and I didn't need a new one. My coworkers sometimes joked that I was the most boring rich person they'd ever met. I took it as a compliment. Cade, my brother, had a different relationship with money, specifically with not having it. He was 33 and had been through 2 failed businesses, a period of unemployment that lasted 14 months, and a divorce that he described as financially devastating, though I was never entirely sure what he meant by that since he hadn't had much to begin with. My parents helped him every time. Quietly, without condition. I'm not sure they ever thought of it as enabling. They thought of it as family. Which was fine. It was their money. The problem came the summer before last, at a 4th of July gathering at my parents' house. It should have been simple. It usually was. I drove 4 hours, slept in my childhood bedroom where the ceiling still had a water stain shaped like a fish, and ate my mother's potato salad and tried to feel at home. Cade brought his girlfriend, Renata, a perfectly nice woman who had the particular energy of someone who smiled with her whole face and listened to everything a little too carefully. I didn't think much of it at the time. People are curious. That's human. What I did not know was that Cade had been talking. Not just vaguely, the way siblings do. Oh, my sister does pretty well. But specifically. He had apparently been building a picture over months, piecing together things I'd mentioned in passing, things our parents had let slip, a comment here, a number there. He was quiet about it the way a person is quiet when they're working something out. On the second day, I was on the back porch alone, going through my email before dinner. I had left my laptop on the porch table when I went inside to help my mother with something in the kitchen. I was gone maybe 12 minutes. When I came back, Cade was standing at the table. My laptop was open. He wasn't touching it anymore, but he was standing close enough that it was clear he had been looking at it, and his face had that very specific look. Mouth slightly open, eyes a little too still. That meant he had seen something he was still processing. I said, "What are you doing?" He didn't answer right away. He looked at me, and then he looked at the screen, and then he said slowly, "You have $11 million in that account." It wasn't a question. The air between us did something strange. I felt very calm, which sometimes happens when something goes so wrong so fast that your body decides panic is not the appropriate response, and instead just goes very, very still. I closed the laptop. I said, "That's private," he said. $11 million, Cade. My voice came out flat. That was not yours to look at. But he had already turned toward the kitchen door, and I understood then that whatever was coming, I was not going to be able to stop it at the source. The door was already opening. Renata was stepping out onto the porch with 2 cans of soda in her hands, and she looked at Cade's face, and then at mine, and she understood immediately that something had shifted. My mother came out behind her, and Cade, my brother who I had grown up alongside, who I had defended in elementary school and bailed out emotionally more times than I could count, turned to our mother and said, "Did you know about this?" He said it like I had done something wrong. My mother looked at me. I watched her expression move through several things at once: surprise, confusion, something that might have been pride but got interrupted by something else, something more complicated. She said, "Know about what?" "She has $11 million, Cade said. "Maybe more." My mother's eyes went wide and then very quickly went somewhere else, somewhere I didn't recognize. She said quietly, "Is that true?" I said, "It's not something I was required to share. We're your family." "Yes, and it's still my money." What happened after that was the part I was not prepared for, even though, if I had thought about it carefully, I probably should have been. Because it wasn't just shock. Shock I could have handled. Shock would have been normal, would have been something we could all have talked through. What I got instead was something closer to grievance. Like I had been hoarding something that belonged to all of us. My father came outside. Someone had told him. He stood in the doorway of the house I had grown up in, and he looked at me like he was doing arithmetic. He said, "Why would you keep something like that from your own parents?" I said, "Because it's my money, Dad. I earned it." He said, "We're not asking for your money." But they were. That was the thing. Maybe they didn't know it yet, but that was exactly where it was going. And I could feel the shape of it forming in the air around us before anyone had said anything direct. It started with Cade. That evening after dinner, he stayed back when everyone else drifted to the living room. He said he wanted to talk. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, and he folded his hands the way he does when he's trying to seem reasonable. And he said, "I know this is weird, but I need you to hear me out." He said he had an opportunity. A business opportunity, the right one this time. He had done the research, he had a partner lined up, he just needed capital to get started. He said he wasn't asking for a gift. He said it was a loan. He said he would pay me back with interest. He said all the things that people say when they want money from someone and are trying to make it feel like a transaction instead of what it actually is. I said, "Cade, I'm not going to do that." He blinked. He had not expected that. He had expected negotiation, maybe, a smaller number, a conversation about terms. He had not expected no. He said, "You have $11 million. I know what I have. And you won't loan your own brother the money to get his life together?" I said, "I've watched you get your life together before. I care about you." The answer is still no. He left the table. He didn't slam anything, which I think cost him something. He went to find our mother. The next morning, my mother came into my bedroom before I was fully awake. She sat on the edge of the bed the way she used to when I was sick as a child, and for a moment it felt so familiar that I almost softened completely. Then she started talking. She said she had been thinking. She said she knew Cade had made mistakes, but he was trying. She said she knew I had worked hard, but that family meant something, didn't it? She said that she and my father weren't getting younger, and they had certain expenses coming up, medical things, nothing serious but still, and she said they had always thought that when any of us were doing well, the others could. I said, "Mom." She stopped. I said, "I love you, and I'm not doing this." She looked at me with something I can only describe as bewilderment, like I had answered a question she wasn't asking. She said, "We're not asking for much." She had not said a number yet. That was the thing. No one had said a number yet, and already it was not much. I said, "What are you asking for?" She said Cade needed $40,000 to start, and they needed about $15,000 for some things around the house and some savings for later. $55,000. Before 9 in the morning, I sat up in bed and I looked at my mother's face. a face I had loved my whole life, and I felt something I had never quite felt before. Not anger, exactly. It was more like clarity. The kind that comes when a picture finally resolves into focus and you realize it was never what you thought it was. I said, "No," she said, "we're your family." I said, "I know. You'd really say no to us? With what you have." I said, "Having money doesn't change what's mine. I worked for this. I made choices that cost me things you don't know about. I didn't ask anyone to fund my path. I'm not going to fund one for Kate either, and I'm not going to feel guilty for that." She sat very still. Then she said, "I don't know who raised you to be like this." And I said, very quietly, "You did. You raised me to take care of myself because no one else was going to." She left without saying anything else. By that afternoon, my father had called my father's sister, my Aunt Beverly, who apparently had opinions about everything and had driven 30 minutes to share them in person. I don't know who called her. I don't know who had been talking in the hours I'd spent upstairs, but when I came down, she was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and that particular expression that people wear when they've decided they're the voice of reason. She said, "Sweetheart, I just think you need to think about what kind of person you want to be." I said, "I'm pretty clear on that." She said, "Your brother needs help." I said, "Beverly, with respect, this is not your business." She said, "It is when it's about family values." I wanted to laugh. I actually had to press my lips together to stop myself, because there was something almost impressive about the confidence it took to say family values to me in that house. In that moment, after the morning I'd had, I said, "I appreciate you coming. I don't have anything else to add." I went back upstairs. I sat on the edge of the bed that still had the same comforter from when I was 15, and I opened my phone, and I looked at my accounts, not because I needed to check anything, but because I needed to remind myself that this was real, that I had built this, that no gathering of people in a kitchen downstairs could change what I had earned or what I owed. I did not owe anyone in that house a single dollar. That night, I booked a hotel room in town. I texted my mother and said I was going to stay there for the rest of the weekend to give everyone space. She did not respond. My father texted back one word, "Fine." Cade didn't text at all. I lay in the hotel bed listening to the town go quiet outside, that particular stillness that small towns have at night, that used to feel safe when I was a child and now just felt like distance, and I let myself feel it, all of it. The grief, because that's what it was, grief for the version of a family that I had been quietly grieving for years without ever naming it. The anger, the exhaustion, and underneath all of it, something else, something I hadn't expected. Relief. The drive home took 4 hours, and I spent most of it not listening to anything. No podcast, no music, just road and sky, and the particular feeling of leaving somewhere that used to mean something to you. In the weeks after that weekend, I took some steps that I should have taken years earlier. I had a conversation with my estate attorney. I updated my documents to reflect what I actually wanted, without assumptions about family obligation. I set up automatic transfers to causes I cared about. Because if I was going to do something generous in this world, I wanted it to mean something to me. I also had a very honest conversation with myself about the phone calls. The Sunday calls. The "How's the dog? How's your knee? Did you watch the game?" I thought about what they were, and whether they were still serving the relationship I actually had versus the one I'd been pretending to have. I didn't stop calling completely, but I stopped performing. I called when I wanted to. I talked about what I felt like talking about. I said no to things without a reason. It took a few months for the noise to settle. Cade sent some texts, first conciliatory, and then a little edged, then eventually just silence. My mother called a few times, and we talked about nothing carefully, like people at a party who have agreed to be polite. My father didn't call much. He never had. What changed wasn't the money. The money had always been there. What changed was that I stopped pretending. The secret of it was shame. I had hidden my success not because I was ashamed of it, but because I knew, somewhere below conscious thought, that revealing it would cost me something. I had been right about that. It did cost me something. It cost me a story I'd been telling myself about my family. A story where underneath all the ways I'd been overlooked, they still fundamentally wanted good things for me. A story where the Sunday calls meant what I hoped they meant. That story is gone. I don't miss it the way I thought I would. What I miss is simpler. I miss the idea of it. The idea of being known by the people who have known you the longest. That loss is real, and I let it be real. I don't try to resolve it into a lesson or a silver lining. I live in a different city now. An apartment with good light and a kitchen I actually cook in. I have friends who have never once asked me what I have in the bank. I have a life that fits the person I actually am, not the version I kept small so other people would feel comfortable around me. Some mornings I sit at the window with my coffee and watch the street below, and I think about that porch, that laptop, my brother's face in the moment he said the number out loud, like saying it would make it partly his. It didn't. I know who I am. I know what I built. And I know the difference between the people who love you and the people who love what you have. It took me 31 years and $11 million to learn it clearly. I don't regret a single choice that got me here. Not the hard years, not the isolation, not the Sundays when I was lonely in a city, far from home, and didn't call anyone because I didn't know what to say that was true. I kept going. I kept building. And the view from here finally is mine.